GSP is returning for a grappling match at the end of the year and says that it could be Habib Nurmagomedov that he is grappling against. We also had Israel Adesanya and John Jones meet up and squash the beef. I want to talk about that in today's video as well. And 2 fight announcements have been made recently. We've had Tuivasa versus Volkov, and way more recently, as in just now, we have Figueiredo versus Cruz as well. I'm going to break down all of these and more on today's MMA News reaction video. We start straight away with the biggest of the stories, the return of GSP. Everyone's talking about it. Return to BJJ on UFC Fight Pass in a grappling tournament. I waited so long on a live stream for this announcement on Fight Pass. I thought it was going to be something big. This is somewhat big. When they first said, and they have clickbaited this massively, just like I've clickbaited you in today's video. They've clickbaited this on the Instagram page of the UFC to just say, GSP returns this December, and it has nearly 250,000 likes already, and they've basically clickbaited everyone. It's a grappling matchup, but GSP did say that it could be Habib that he's grappling against. So although it might not be Habib, it's very clear that he's looking for a big name to grapple against, and he's just looking to compete and get back in there. So I think if Habib hears this, yes or no, if Habib hears that GSP is doing a grappling match in December and doesn't mind the idea of the opponent being Habib for that grappling match, I think Habib would be like, I'll take that. I'll take that. GSP has always been Habib's hero. His entire life, GSP has been Habib's hero. And now he's got a chance to compete against him and a reason to stay in shape as well. I think that could be a reality. Do I think it's actually going to happen? Probably not. They're probably not going to do GSP versus Habib, but there could be other options that they go for as well. We could have GSP versus Anderson Silva. That could be an option. We could even do just a little bit of a run back of Habib versus Nick Diaz in a grappling match. You could do GSP versus Nate Diaz. You could find a bunch of names to grapple against GSP for a certain amount of money. Of course, they're not going to get paid a crazy amount because it is on Fight Pass and it is a grappling match that no one is genuinely interested by. But GSP is the type of guy against the right name that could genuinely bring some interest to a grappling match, because the last one I watched was so utterly boring and terrible, and it made me wonder, is there any way to actually make this interesting? Because oftentimes it's just 2 guys standing up and hand fighting for the entire duration of it, and neither of them gets a submission. So I think they should do maybe GSP Usman in a grappling match. They could also do GSP Nick Diaz, Nate Diaz. They could even do GSP Habib. They could do GSP Anderson Silva. There's a few options they could go for here. And I hope they go with one of the better ones, as in Anderson Silva or Habib, because that would genuinely be as big as a big UFC pay-per-view. And it would bring a ton of eyes to the grappling scene as well, because if that's going on the weekend, oh, by the way, GSP's grappling Habib, that will compete with a UFC fight night and blow it out the water. If there's a mediocre pay-per-view on that weekend, and there's also GSP wrestling Habib at the same time, that will compete with that as well. They're not going to do that because it's the UFC doing both of them, so they'll probably do this on a Friday or something like that. But, like, I'm just saying how much that would compete with some proper UFC cards if it was to be on at the same time. I like this. I like that GSP's using it to stay back in shape. I hope that he continues this trend. I'd much rather watch MMA guys grapple than box for a bit of extra money after their career. I know there's more money in boxing, but maybe with this move by GSP, we can create more money in the grappling world to get some of these veterans not to take a crazy amount of damage. Tito Ortiz did not need those extra KOs at boxing. If there was a grappling alternative and we could see him and Liddell do a bit of a grappling match, that would be pretty cool. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even mind seeing GSP versus Donald Cerrone or GSP versus someone along those lines either. Anthony Pettis versus GSP in a grappling match. It could get interesting, but I really hope, and this is a message from me to Habib. Habib, GSP's your hero. Your dad always wanted you to fight against him. Take the grappling match against GSP and make December amazing, because it's already looking like it might have some pretty big cards in December and some pretty good comebacks of big name fighters and a big pay-per-view card as well. If they could pull this off on a Friday night in December, that would be absolutely massive. And I think they should be pushing for GSP versus Habib. But we'll see what goes down. Just thought I'd talk about that situation. We also had Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya squashing their beef, which I always think is absolutely crazy. If I'm saying something to you and I'm basically having a beef with you and it's real beef, there's no reconciliation of a friendship there. Really. There is a bit, but not in real life. Maybe it's different when you're like jokingly insulting someone on the internet and get into an internet beef, and then, you know, you can like be nice to them on the internet. Maybe like there is a part of it like that, but I don't know, dude. I just find it weird how yesterday there was still a beef between them, but then as soon as they've run into each other today, all of a sudden there's no beef and they squashed the beef. I guess they just didn't want a big interaction between them, because judging by the comparison of the two of them, if there was an interaction between Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya and they did get into a scuffle, I'm just going to say this right now. There's no conversation over who would win. Jon Jones is literally built different to Israel Adesanya. And Jon Jones, like, I mean, he's looking pretty pudgy at heavyweight. Like, they're a similar size, but Jon Jones is clearly taller. But he is a much larger man than Israel Adesanya. You can see it in the legs. You can see it in the body as well. The arms of Jon Jones compared to Israel. The head of Jon Jones compared to Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya, in comparison, is built like a toothpick compared to Jon Jones. And Jon Jones is taller than him as well. So I think Jon Jones would have ragdolled Izzy in a fight and torn his arm off. But I think it's interesting that they're settling the beef. I don't know, dude. I just feel like it's a bit of a weird situation, because even if you see him in person or not, Jon Jones still is a W beater, if you know what I'm saying. So it's weird that when people meet him, they're like, oh, you know, we met up. He's a nice guy, really. Like, he's still done all of the things that he's done. You meeting them in person doesn't remove all of the terrible things Jon Jones has done, but they're being friendly with each other. I think this means that fight's never going to happen. If they would have got into a bit of a confrontation, I would have been like, if Jones wins in December and Izzy wins in September and then fights in December at like heavyweight, maybe they could sort something out where we get this fight before the end of their careers. But seeing as they were so nice to each other, I think it's a very unlikely scenario. But I do want to touch on the height again, because I love talking about height, because I used to think I was 6'4" until I realized whilst measuring myself that I'm barely 6'3". Like, a lot of people are lying about their height. Lying profusely about it as well. And it happens a lot more often at the upper end. Like Tyson Fury barely being taller than Alex Pereira. There's no way he's 6'9". Let's be real there. And we also have the Jon Jones and Adesanya interaction. I don't know how many more times I'm going to have to see Adesanya up against a 6'4" person before we realize that Adesanya's 6'2" or 3. I'm probably the same height as Adesanya. A tall 6'2" or barely 6'3". There's no way that guy's 6'4", but the UFC is going to UFC. They had Rosenstruik at 6'4" as well when he looks about 6'2" anyway. So, yeah, interesting there. Izzy's not the height he says he is once again. But Jon Jones is a different man to Adesanya and would absolutely ragdoll him. We move on to another bit of news that came out, which is Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov. Massive matchup in the heavyweight division. Is this the end of Tuivasa's career? There is a chance for Tuivasa to win this one. He has a solid chance because of the calf kicks on Volkov. Volkov's a very tall heavyweight. But the problem I have with that is, if I'm going to be picking Tuivasa to win that fight using calf kicks, Volkov is exceptionally light on his lead leg. He's very Jan Blachowicz-esque at heavyweight, you know what I mean? Although he's nowhere near the size and frame of Jan Blachowicz, the way he deals with leg kicks and lifts up that lead leg sometimes and turns it into a lead leg body kick or a teep to the body instead is very Jan Blachowicz-esque. And I'm worried that if Tuivasa tries to chop those calves, he's going to get a few of them checked. However, even if Volkov does check him, is that going to put off Tuivasa, or is it going to hurt Volkov even more, because Tuivasa's shins are made of different material? Those are some Samoan shins right there. But I like this matchup. I'm just worried for Tuivasa because of the damage he's taken recently. Whilst Volkov has been looking better than ever recently, I think the real changes that Volkov made were very evident in the Overeem fight, when he showed up way larger than usual and just mogged Overeem pretty much and beat him up start to finish, eventually finishing him in the second round. But since that fight, Volkov has had some pretty decent performances. You know what I mean? He had the Overeem fight. Then he went to a very close decision with Cyril Gane. Although Gane won very clearly, don't get me wrong, Volkov won the first round of that, and he made a couple of the other rounds pretty close. But then after that, he beat Tybura pretty easily and used his grappling offensively on that fight, which I think is something he may do against Tuivasa here. Try and mix in a takedown here and there. Who knows? Got schooled by Aspinall, but that was just when Aspinall was on a different level that night. Nothing was beating Aspinall that night. And then since then, Rosenstruik smoked him in the first round and smoked Romanov in the first round. And Romanov has just bounced back to win, and I think Rosenstruik just bounced back to win as well, although it was against Dorcas, so it's basically like whatever, you know, but since then he lost to Almeida as well. I think it's interesting matchup. I'm worried about Tai Tuivasa dealing with the teeps to the body of Volkov and the long shots of Volkov as well. Tuivasa did land on Cyril Gane, which I understand, but I don't know if he's going to be able to land and drop Volkov, because one thing that Volkov does not get enough credit for is his absolutely stunning chin that he has. He has been KO'd by Derek Lewis, and you can look back at other fights in his career. You will go a long way until you'll see Vitaly Minakov KO'd him in 2013 in Bellator. You know what I mean? And other than that, he hasn't lost by KO other than to Derek Lewis. He's fought so many good fighters over the years at Bellator, at M1, and in the UFC. He's been in the UFC since 2016. At heavyweight, this is. And he's only been KO'd by Lewis in the UFC. And other than that, it's a guy in 2013, Vitaly Minakov, where he got TKO'd. Like, the guy's chin's pretty underrated, and I don't think Tuivasa is going to be able to land at a range where he's going to be able to generate full power. I think he's going to be lunging, overthrowing shots, maybe catching Volkov at the end of his shots, rather than nice and close like how he caught Augusto Sakai. And I think Volkov's going to be able to survive and outpoint Tuivasa on the outside, maybe mixing a takedown here and there, who knows. I've got Volkov, sucks for Tuivasa, but I'm thinking Volkov wins that matchup. We move on to another fight that got announced, which is very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to it, which is Figueiredo versus... what am I thinking of? Figueiredo versus Dominic Cruz. I just saw a few messages on my Instagram that threw me off there from people telling me about some stuff. Either way, Figueiredo versus Dominic Cruz. Huge fight. Just got announced. Full Violence has just posted about it. Spinning Backfist has talked about it. Apparently a Brazilian media member talked about it and let the news leak that they were planning on making that fight happen in September. I'm just going to look at some of the September dates. I don't mind the idea of this matchup. I think it's tough for Manel Cap because he wanted that fight with Figueiredo but didn't end up getting it. Oh well, he's going to get another matchup. Has got another matchup. But we look at the UFC in September, and it does need a bit of help. That's the next month that we're focusing on now. And then it's time to focus on October in Abu Dhabi. There's an open fight night main event on the 23rd of September. That could be a fight night main event, but it will be a weak one. I think we can all agree. Figueiredo versus Cruz is a big fight, but fight night main event to hold up on a card on its own might not be strong enough for that. It could happen on the Grasso-Shevchenko Independence Day card. Maybe they do it as the co-main event or the feature fight there. I don't know what kind of Mexican theme they would have, but Cruz's second name is Cruz, so maybe they would go with that. Maybe they would do something in Australia. I know Cruz has traveled to Australia a few times for the commentary job, so he's clearly not scared to go over there. And honestly, it might work perfectly for September because some of the Australian guys at July might not be ready for Australia in September, and they've already got Cara France versus Cap on that card as well. And not a lot of people want to fight in Australia anyway, and they've used up a lot of their Australians in July. So if they want a nice big name matchup that's a guaranteed big fight for Australia that they can just add on there, I would probably add Dominic Cruz versus Davison Figueiredo to that card just to spice it up a little bit, give it a bit of more consistency throughout the card, maybe have it be the headliner of the prelims, who knows. It also could be the September 23rd main event of a fight night, but we'll see what they end up doing with it. Other than that is Paris in September, and I don't know if Cruz and Figueiredo are going to be fighting then anyway, because that is in 8 weeks. So we'll see what date they decide to go with in September. Maybe they even announce a new date on the 31st of September or the 30th of September. We'll see how that goes. But in terms of the matchup, I think Cruz is going to win. Figueiredo is good. But I think he's so open. And I think this is a great matchup, and I don't even know who to pick on this one, man. I don't know who to pick on this one, because I think Figueiredo's size and power really carried his career. You know what I mean? People are saying RIP Dominic Cruz. What a legend. You know what I mean? RIP? This is a very winnable fight for him. Cruz is going to have a big size advantage over Figueiredo. He's a big bantamweight, by the way. Remember how Cruz looked against Cejudo? And Cejudo and Figueiredo are very similar sized flyweights, both big dudes for the division. Maybe Figueiredo's a little bit taller and has longer arms, but still, I think Cruz is going to have a big size advantage here. And I think if he puts a pace on him the same way he put a pace on Pedro Munoz and put a pace on Casey Kenny, I think he can mix in the takedowns and make stuff happen in this fight. And I don't see Figueiredo knocking him out cold. I could see Figueiredo dropping him. And if it's a free rounder, it's going to give advantage to Figueiredo because it will be more value those short moments of success that maybe Figueiredo can have. So if I was Cruz, I would look for a 5-rounder here and just try and put the pressure and the volume on Figueiredo and make him worry about a whole bunch of different things. A takedown, a shot, a kick, a punch, whatever he does, do it in volume over 5 rounds. That would be Cruz's best chance. But we'll see how Figueiredo looks up a weight class. Maybe the weight cut has been holding him back at flyweight. I genuinely think this is a pick 'em fight, and I have no idea who I'm going to go with. But honestly, looking at Figueiredo's technique that he has often shown in his recent fights on the feet especially, and even some of his takedown defense where he will just jump a guillotine every single time, I can see Cruz outsmarting him and making him miss because Figueiredo throws a lot into his shots and they're very telegraphed shots. There is a little bit more slick about what he does. He'll whip up a head kick after a punch. Figueiredo's not whipping up a head kick after a punch. He's loading up big punches on Dominic Cruz. And I think Cruz has dealt with that and will be able to deal with Figueiredo at bantamweight. I like the matchup though, so we'll see why they do it in September. I would argue they should do it on the September pay-per-view of Australia to lock down as many sick fights as they can for that card, because who knows who's going to come out unscathed in July on the Australian side of things. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Had to do another video today because this is a ton of news to break down. Toodle pip. See you later. Yeah, goodbye.